But there is no separate, because you're the inventor, you now get a separate royalty. That's not happening.
Oh, yeah.
Right. You know, and it's different in musicals.
I mean, no, it's just a music video, and I have it else.
I've done musicals in the past where
In case it erases it, it's totally fine. There's nothing else on it.
both
It's just
people
about
wrote
our
music
point.
and the lyrics are just split at 50-50.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep, it'll erase everything. Spence is on there as well.
exactly. Whatever
I'm
comes
gonna
in,
give
we
this
split
back to you.
whether it's book, lyric, music, doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Let's do that.
Right.
Here's yours.
You want a PDF or a PowerPoint?
How are they? Partisan music world.
It just fell off. It's not in. It's not in.
That really is made for There you go. Try it.
Sarah, would you be okay if I did introductions and then so that everyone can make sure that they get to the competition? Just like by the start, yeah. Okay, awesome. Okay, but are we good to go do it? Do we know how it works? Okay, and then will you load it on?
Maybe it's a A1.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this session on investing in the arts. When we were putting together this summit, you know, we wanted to have facets of creative life cycles that appeal to everyone in the creative economy. And so obviously you've seen a lot of panels that have to do with, you know, building equity in the arts and what is the return on investment, both financial and social. You've seen a lot of fantastic live performance, but we really wanted to have a space where we could actually dive into the mechanisms of how arts projects get built. And so that's what you're going to see today. We're going to have people trickle in. We're going to have people trickle in from the courtyard where people are talking about, like, you know, the exciting new ventures being built. And then as soon as this is all over, we are going to go downstairs and we are going to listen to 10 arts ventures give pitches in the same way that you would hear startups give pitches. So we're hoping that this is a opportunity to bridge the gap between the people who know how investing works traditionally in the startup landscape and those who know how artistic assets are generally built. We have an unbelievable community panel, and we're working out some tech. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce everyone. First up, we have Penny Luedtke, who is a fabulous theater agent and producer who has actually been representing one of MOC's projects for how long? Forever and ever. And so when we were doing this amazing workshop that we're doing in collaboration with the Schwarzman Center, we wanted to give Penny a platform to talk about how creative art assets are built, knowing that there is one literally being built here on Yale's campus as we speak. So Penny's going to talk about that. Next up, we're going to talk to Joselito Seldara, who is the writer and the producer and filmographer of the film Screw City, which is another one of MOC's projects. Joselito not only is a working artist who is actively building and producing his own work, he also is a professor at USC who teaches this. So we're going to get an in-depth look at the ways that independent films are financed and how investors can expect returns. And then finally, we have one of my favorite people in the world and maybe the biggest advocate for MOC on this campus, who's Sven Riethmueller, who's our lawyer. And Sven is going to take us through the compatibility of the MOC model with the startup space. So we're going to talk a little bit about how companies are built, and then we're also going to talk about how that applies to building creative assets. So I am going to let Sarah. How close do you think we are?
We're there. Which sorry. Which one would you like queued up first?
So we're actually going to start with Penny.
Great.
And to my knowledge, we're just going to have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
So without further ado, Penny.
Hi. So I've been asked to tell you a little bit about the journey of Shimmer and connect it to how musicals and IP is monetized through its beginning phases to hopefully financial liquidity. So Shimmer, it's 20 years.
In the making, 20 years in the making.
That's not normal. Well, 7, 8, 9, that's pretty normal. It takes a very long time to develop IP, which is why when you go to Broadway today, you see film on stage. You see Mrs. Doubtfire, you see Devil Wears Prada, you see, not a lot of original because you already know the name. The IP is established, it's gonna make money. For an original piece, it takes quite a bit longer. The groundswell has to happen through the community, then further outreach into the ticket holders, the buyers, the merchandisers, whatever. Shimmer started, Sarah Schulman gave me a call in 2003, I think, asking if Anthony Davis, who's a client, would be interested in writing a musical. And he had already written one, but it didn't get off the ground. And Amit Erdogan, who was at Atlantic Records at the time, was one of the proponents of that, and it didn't go anywhere. So that tells you something about musicals. You can have the most famous person in music behind it, and it still maybe doesn't go. Anyway, so they started writing. We had different workshops. We had different places that it went to. Nobody commissioned it, meaning anyone writing this, Michael, Sarah, Tony, didn't make a dime. Every time we went into a recording studio, either I fronted it or I had friends who did favors, or so we put it together this way. This is one way of getting it done. It's like MLC came and said, hey, this is great. I pitched it to a number of different places over the years, and because the subject matter was something that the world wasn't quite ready to accept on stage, namely first a lesbian protagonist on stage, which no one thought was going to fly. Flash forward how many years later, and some of the best musicals on Broadway have lesbian protagonists, but whatever. So MLC stepped in and asked with a new eye to it if we would be interested. And I thought, you know what, it's a new world, and I can give you a list of things that I'm developing right now. I have a musical that I just got the underlying rights for. It's a TYA book, Theater for Young Audiences book, or whatever, teens. Had the meeting with the book writer and her agent, got it signed up, so now I have clients writing the musical. Next I will shop it financially as soon as it's ready. And when a musical is ready, if you're taking it to something like the Fringe Festival or to National Alliance of Musical Theaters, everybody requires a different amount of the commodity to be finished. So if you're taking it to National Alliance, you have to have the whole thing finished, which this isn't yet, but it will be at that point. You have people subscribe to National Alliance. They come, they see the piece, they pay money to see the piece. You get to do 30 minutes of your piece, and then hopefully maybe a regional theater will pick it up. So there are a couple of different financial streams that are available for writers today. It's either the regional theater, an angel investor, your friend, your mom, your dad, an uncle, an aunt, a philanthropist, a commercial producer. Commercial producers will option it, and they'll give you a certain amount of money to hold the piece for them to shop it and see if they can get it done. There's a mix of development that's been happening a lot in the regions, which is it's great, but it's gotten way more expensive than it used to be. You used to be able to go to a regional theater. I took, because of Winn-Dixie, to a theater in the South, and I had a $50,000 enhancement. That was it. This was maybe 10 or 12 years ago. This was great. The theater was so happy because we brought money with it, and so we got to do the production. if you want to enhance a theater piece today at one of the larger theaters that do a lot of the development, like La Jolla or Old Globe, Goodman does it, well, they do, but it's like $1.5 million to $3 million. It's ridiculous. And you want to bring it to a theater and do the sets and costumes that then you can bring into the yard. So let's just say that we get all of this done. You get it done. Shimmer is here. Somebody picks it up. A commercial producer picks it up. The next step is we're going to go to Broadway. Then you have to think about what the capitalization is for the piece. And for Shimmer, because it's a fairly large piece, I don't think it's going to capitalize at less than maybe 15 to 20 million. And I don't know, everything has doubled in cost in the last, since the pandemic. I mean, literally everything. So it could be more than that. And then the producers will hopefully set up a budget. You have general partners who are responsible financially and otherwise for the property. And hopefully they have a good enough head for numbers and for art that they will be able to push this project forward without spending the entire capitalization, and then they have to close. So you have to have a huge reserve on top of that, which means you take money and you put it aside, and you spend that money only to run the show. You can't use it for anything else. It's there in case ticket sales don't work. Avenue Q, when it opened many years ago, I represented the whole cast, and we were really a little nervous about, like, they had all given up jobs to do other things, all the actors and the they were all just there. And the producers were so smart in how they did it. They spent almost no money on advertising. They literally gave tickets away to college kids, to every assistant in the industry, to anyone anyone who was interested, and boom, it took off like a rocket. So every piece has a different trajectory. I do have one really interesting piece I'm working on right now. It'll be off Broadway starting the 23rd, I think it previews. It's called Triple Threat. It's a one-man show, which is a losing proposition, period. Unless you have, Whoopi Goldberg or something like that. You're not going to make any money because the front-loading that it takes in order to get this piece done, the tickets you'd have to sell, it's just, it's whatever, it's impossible. But there's a company that is a huge media company, and they put money aside in the last number of years to try to get back, to do something good. So they picked this up, and they're doing this at, the budget is substantial for off-Broadway, and I know they're doing it at almost a complete loss. Even if they sell every ticket, they're still, for all the advertising and things that they're doing, they're losing money on the live performance, but they are filming it. And they already have interest in some of the distribution mediums like Netflix and Amazon in order to purchase it. So their income stream will come from that. And it's more and more that's happening today than just waiting for the ticket sales. If you wait for ticket sales in theater, forget it. I don't know how anything even runs. Yeah.
Well, and I just want to reflect back kind of what I'm hearing. So one, it's an incredibly perilous journey to build a musical, right?
Yes.
Because you have this extraordinary IP. Sometimes it's, you're adapting something from a book or maybe from a movie. But you have the original IP, and then basically you kind of wait around to see like who's interested. What business type is going to help structure around it and put the financials together to back it.
Which is why I go back to, you see so many film names on stage. I don't mean film as an actor, like Hugh Jackman is wonderful, but I mean like you see a film and 10 years later it's on Broadway. You think, do I need to see that? Didn't I see the film? Is it going to be any better on stage than it was? But you know it, so you're curious and you go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a built-in audience.
Yeah, but I wanted to point something out because one thing that my good friend Emily is really thinking about in the opera space is what you alluded to with the packaging of that IP and the potential to redistribute it as film, to take it and like expand all of its merchandising potentials and to like reach a broader global audience than just Broadway. Broadway should really be kind of step one, and
Yeah, and Broadway also, if we're talking specifically Broadway, and like let's set up the unions in a different place. and off-Broadway in a different place, because off-Broadway died 25 years ago and it's only institutional. I mean, there's really no place for a commercial off-Broadway producer, which is why the producers who are doing my clients' work is losing everything, because you can't, financially, you can't get your money back. But the unions charge, it's insane. Yeah, so Broadway is broken. I mean, it's broken. I've been doing this for many years, and I keep looking at it and thinking, where is this going to end? The theaters, not only do they get a percentage of your gross weekly box office, they get a guarantee. So that theater is guaranteed every week a certain amount of money from the producers. And if you're selling over the mark, that producer also has to pay a percentage of their profit to the theater. And at some point, if the theater says, you're not paying me a high enough percentage above the guarantee, you're out, then you have to go out as a producer and say, do I take like an emergency loan so I can pay more? What do I do? I want to keep the show running, because if it runs on Broadway a certain amount of time, I'll get it to the regions, and the regions will help us recoup our losses on Broadway. So it's financially, Broadway has become, I mean, it's always been a securities and exchange investment vehicle. You have to have that, but yeah.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, please.
So,
especially you.
I know, as I'm listening to...
I don't know who is it. Can I locate myself in something?
No. Jim Boyle Ventures. As I'm listening to the challenges of finding audiences for creative works, I mean, on the life sciences side, we always say to the entrepreneur, you have the unmet need of whatever that drug or device is. On the tech side, we say, do you have product market fit, and what problem are you solving? How does your product basically solve a problem that consumers are facing and do it in a cost-effective manner? It sounds like for a creative work that's not necessarily filling an unmet need or solving a problem, you have the issue of demand generation. Like, how do you generate demand? And what you just described in terms of giving tickets away or some other mechanism there, is there some way that you could partner with agencies who were incented to help drive demand generation?
Well, it's called a publicist, a press agent.
I'll give you a specific example. On TV, we suffer through all the TV commercials for law firms who want us to sign on to class action lawsuits. Do you know that investors back those commercials because they get a piece of that take? They get a big piece of that take. So I'm just wondering, are there mechanisms for creatives to essentially partner with people who would say, I will fund this, but I want a piece of the action if I'm really successful?
I think that's where it's going. I mean, I think that this is sort of Midnight Oil Collective. I think, this is, I produced a musical in Korea. Because I had a client that was writing something and it needed to be done, and I had friends in Korea. The producers of the big musicals in Korea became friends. Whatever, we got this piece over there, and their world is completely different than ours. So what we're doing here, Broadway is owned by how many companies or people that own those theaters? You don't get in. You don't get in unless you know the Nederlanders or Schubert. You don't get in. Korea is the state. It's not individuals, but it's the families that have basically run the state. So it's the same thing. So there are all these closed doors. And I'm not really sure I don't know what the answer is. I've been doing this for a long time and helping people. I mean, I call myself social services for the arts because that's what I do. I try to help facilitate things every day. And I'm not looking to get rich. I assume if I'm doing what I love, I will make a living. And I have. And I've been fine. But man, it's getting hard for creatives. It's getting really hard for people to create new content that is, it doesn't even have to be enlightening. How about enjoyable and engaging and mind-provoking? I don't know. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see you over there. I wanna get your question in just a second. I'm guessing I want to be very transparent that I'm hoping to set up how terrible the industry is so that we can introduce Sven and we can have a conversation about possibilities for reconsidering or reimagining these models. So I do want to set up just sort of the paradigm reality of where creators are trying to create right now, with the hopes of broadening it to a discussion about can these things creatively be fixed.
I do have one good brick and mortars idea before I forget it. If anybody in here is thinking about investing in any kind of theatrical property, not intellectual property, but brick and mortars, please come to New York City. Please come to Midtown. Please lease the floors that are empty, all those office spaces, and please open theaters. I don't care if it's for immersive. Just open some entertainment spaces. So we have some things that are other than the few Broadway owners and then the institutional off-Broadway. I mean, the things that are coming over from London right now, so much of it is immersive. I mean, the Guys and Dolls over there is immersive. The Great Gatsby is here, they're rehearsing right now, it's immersive. We just need, other than buying a ticket, sitting in the seat. Everybody, there's money to be made in this industry. It's just going in a way that it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
Let me get this question over here.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Lolende. I'm the founder of Northfest and Portal X. And so I'm very passionate about audience cultivation. And so I heard you say that in biotech, we need to find people, we have to find out that there's a need, right? That there's a demand. And I would argue that in the arts, there's always a need. There are, most of us consume content on the basis of what the algorithms deliver to us. But we might find 10 years later that there was an amazing film that would have changed our lives if we had only known about it when it came out. And so I'm just curious how you guys think about audience cultivation and connecting people to the stories that really would serve them individually, and how that might shift from the idea of just kind of popularizing something and getting enough, millions of people to hear about it, to helping somebody understand that this story might be my medicine.
Yeah, I want to speak to that a little bit because you're absolutely right. And the reality is that according to the Nielsen survey, Americans are consuming up to 11 hours of content a day. These are adult Americans. Think about how much media we put into our brains. And a lot of it is, if you're like me, a lot of it is TikTok and Instagram. And I like to think that we could live in a world in which the content that we are consuming is a little bit more soul-feeding than that is. But it's going to necessitate what Jim is talking about, which is re-examining distribution models that actually connects content with the intended audiences. And right now in the creative economy, that is so broken that we only have, institutional theaters, institutional streamers, technology that is not refined enough to figure out, what we need other than what sex we're attracted to or whatever, right? That's kind of the world that we live in. And all of this is an opportunity to reimagine how to get people the content that they need.
Yeah, and
What'd you say?
Just have to let you know that we have an algorithm for that. So
Yeah. Amazing.
Other complications are, it's not just, the brick and mortar things, but the union that you're dealing with, the SAG-AFTRA union or Equity or AGMA or whatever union you're dealing with in the venue. It's AGMA for opera, it's Equity for live theater, it's SAG-AFTRA for film and TV, tape distribution. Online, SAG-AFTRA tries to claim that there's a lot of non-union. And during the pandemic, I can tell you, one of my friends and clients was running a theater, and he couldn't afford to not do his content. He had to figure out how to do it. So he called Equity and said, I've got to figure out how to stream this to my audiences. And Equity, in their all-knowingness, said, well, sorry, we don't know how to do that. Yeah. So he said, well, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, SAG-AFTRA covers film and television. And he said, you're okay if I call SAG-AFTRA? They said, well, we don't have anything to help you with.
The practice is, it's so
and he almost got shut down for doing it after the fact. And then everybody's like, go, you did it. But he filmed his Zoom whatever theater, and that's what his whole subscription was that year.
Yeah.
Was all Zoomed, theater.
So let's pivot, because I want Joselito to talk a little bit about the traditional contracts for independent film and how you would build out an independent film and what types of relationships you have. And I know you have
contracts or
I just really want you to go through your PowerPoint.
Oh yeah.
guys, for people who are late, can you just introduce yourselves? I know I'm like not the only person.
I'm Frances. No, I'm just kidding. This is Penny Luedtke.
I'm Penny Luedtke. Penny.
This is Joselito Seldara. This is Sven Riethmueller. Penny is, can you give your titles and your...
I'm an agent in New York City, and I have helped clients produce things for many years on many different levels in different arenas.
And Penny's very near and dear because she also has represented Shimmer, the musical that's in development with MOC for its whole life cycle. Joselito is a professor at USC and a filmmaker, and you're multi-hyphenate.
Yeah, write, produce, direct.
Does it all. And then Sven is one of my favorite people in the universe because he has been the biggest advocate for MOC and has actually constructed the legal contracts that have allowed us to start to interrogate some of these models.
Scroll down. How do I move the PowerPoint?
You can just use the clicker.
Really? I just move forward. All right. All right, so this is like 2 slides. I'll roll through the first 5, but the next slide is what we really want to look at. Straight off, movies, high risk, high reward investment. When you do your contracts and your executive agreements and summaries and things like that, there's a huge appendix at the end explaining to potential investors why this is like a really high risk investment, right? And that's where you hear some people will lose their homes investing in movies. Some hit real big. Invest $100,000, makes like $6 million on the opening weekend. So that's the high risk, high reward thing. But basically, when your investors put in money, this is how you get your money back, right? So number one, exhibitors. Like theaters, you're talking about your big chain theaters. If you're gonna go theatrical, you're talking like AMC, Cinemarks, they take a big cut, right? First, like you sell your movie for $6 million, they're gonna take a cut. Then it just trickles down. The buyer, distributor will take the next cut. They're going to take some recoupment. Anything they pay you ahead of time, print and advertising comes out of that, any fees. So distributors and buyers, you can equate them, they're the people that take on your movie to sell it to theaters, to sell it to the streamers and Netflix and things like that, right? Who comes next? Sales agents. And I apologize if there's any used car salesmen here, but I've been told that sales agents are pretty much the used car salesmen of the distribution world. You don't really need them. Producers can call up distribution companies and you just trying to get your film watched, see if they like it. Easy to do. If you're real busy, sometimes this helps. Their job is to find distributors for your content. They'll take their commission, recoupable expenses. They're the ones that travel the markets like Cannes, AFI, Berlin, Toronto. I think that's a market where you just buy and sell movies there all day. And AFI is actually, that's all they do. They're not even a film festival. But there's travel expenses involved in that. And they make posters, they design your DVD covers, and things like that. They'll take the money back there. Goes the producer's rep. Producer's rep is your rep, as a producer, they'll rep you to get you a sales agent or a buyer distributor. They'll get their fee, which is anywhere between 5 to 15%. And then 5 is a production company. That's you. That's you. So when we get to 5, that's the one that's important. It goes to debt first. So sometimes you need to get loans, debt financing to cover gaps. Before you're going to be promised money, but you're not going to get it till after you deliver the movie. So now you have to get a loan to cover that. You have to pay all that stuff back first. Then it goes to investors. Equity investors, number 7. Actually, I broke this down a little more. I'm going to keep going here. Here we go. So this is what I already talked about. This is number 2, recoup print and advertising, minimum guarantees, fees. 3, recoup marketing materials, producers rep 5 to 15% fee. There you go. Gap and bridge lenders, pre-sale loans. Equity investors. So 7 of the waterfall. Investors receive an additional 20%. So you get paid first if you're investing. You get 100. Traditionally, you get 120%. You get 100% of your investment plus a 20% premium. All right, that's negotiable. Some investors might want more. You might offer less. The 20% is pretty standard. Everyone's paid back on a pro rata pari pass-through basis. So everyone paid back at the same time. based on the percentage you've invested in. After equity investors, it goes to deferrals after the 120% is paid. Deferrals these are sort of deals you make with like crew and maybe actors in the beginning, like we'll pay you after it's done. Basically in the film world, if you're told that and you're a crew member, you're just working for free, essentially, because you never get paid back. If it gets to that point, number 9, finally, equity investors get money and producers get money. What that means is, at the last in the waterfall, you get a 50-50 split with your investors. Sometimes producers will give out points to actors or crew, like, I'm going to pay you under your rate, so I'll give you 2 points on the back end. It's 2% of the producer's shares. It all comes out of producer shares. So basically it means you don't want to give away too many points. You want to save them for who's going to be, who you're going to need it for. But that's where the producers finally get paid. It's a split with equity investors. And this is just kind of like a recap. Everything's checked off, and that's where the money comes out. I cross out things you don't necessarily, I try to avoid. On my first feature, we did this investment structure. Friends and family, very low budget. We cut out the sales agent. We didn't have any debt financing. We didn't have any deferrals, right? So that shrinks the waterfall a little bit, but it's still a lot to go. I think that's it. Yep, that's it. That's basically how it works.
So,
Can we ask a question about can you put the chart back up?
If I could, Allison? They're trying to give me a crash course.
we're artists, not techies.
Which chart?
The last one before the red lines. That's good. That's a good one right there. So normally in other asset classes, for tech or biotech investing, typically if an investment is made out of a fund, the split between the limited partners who provide the capital and the general partners of the fund is typically an 80-20 split, where most of the money goes to the limited partners, not to the fund members themselves. Here you say it's 50-50. So can you describe why that is so? Because the producers take on a lot more work?
So I can answer that because I actually know both of these worlds. So the 80-20, obviously those are basically just capital formation partners.
Yeah.
With a producer, like that's a really, really hands-off partner. So for instance, in MOC's fund structure, we actually are a 50-50 split. And that's because you are assuming a lot of that risk and liability as the producer. So it's not just capital formation where you're like, cutting a big check and kind of following up maybe on a board seat, but you're actually like, kind of on the ground building the asset with the artist.
Well, bear in mind, there's, in your typical venture fund, there's management fees. There are no management fees here.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank
it's
you.
different. And then that's for a fund structure. This is for an individual production.
Right.
So
I should also mention, I'm not sure, like in the tech world, how much say your investors have, in this.
yeah, I'll be talking about that.
Okay, cool. Because in this, you pretty much try to keep your equity investors out of any kind of creative say.
We do too.
Okay, good. That's great. So this works great.
Again, that's, I think, the wrong analogy. You're comparing VC funds. He's talking about production of a film, which is much more similar to a portfolio company, in which the investors have a lot more say. I'll be talking about that in a moment.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that is not the right analogy, VC fund, to this, what you're setting up here.
Well, and just to say, I mean, like when you're talking about it, I mean, like, yes, these assets are high risk, high reward. Yes, they can ultimately hit very big at the box office. But like Penny and Joselito, I just kind of wonder if like you can talk about sort of the returns that the artists themselves can see when they've been developed in like the traditional structure.
So if the gold standard in musical theater is the production contract, the APC approved production contract, which is Dramatists Guild. And with Dramatists Guild, for a certain amount of time, let's say the show's successful and it's running, the producer partakes in a huge chunk of the
It's enormous.
It's 40%.
Yeah.
It downscales over time, but the producer gets back quite a lot of money. And that contract also allows for subsidiary rights, ancillary rights, and territories. And the territories you have to purchase separately over time. Like if you're successful on Broadway and you want to do London, you do it right away. If you're successful and you think about, oh, maybe the German-speaking world, you pay more and you get that. And you have time the producers have time in order to produce it there, but they pay a small amount of money up front to hold it. And if they don't, then the writers have the ability to go out and do that in that territory. But generally speaking, anything that is monetized on that Broadway stage will go into a producer's pocket, some percentage of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then I wanted to say, like, on an independent film, Sven, Allison, can you help Sven set up this PowerPoint? And hopefully though, like on a film, like an independent film, if it does create a return, like what percentage of that are you as the artist seeing?
Well, it'd be, personally, for like Sioux City, since I'm a producer, it just come out of the producer's thing.
Right.
Our producers, as a writer, as a director, you just pay that up front as a fee. Sometimes you can negotiate it.
So you're not even really participating in the back end.
No.
As the writer, as the creator,
No.
you're not even participating in the back end.
No.
Just as a producer.
This as a producer, even though I'm writing it, I wrote and directed it.
Right.
Yeah. If I was just a writer-director, I was not producing it, unless I negotiated points on the back end and out of the producer share, I wouldn't see anything out the back end.
Yeah. So all to say, it's not great out here in these waters. But one thing I wanted to bring in is that we're trying to reimagine these contracts, obviously, for artists. And what does it mean if you take a much more lean and strategic model that we see in other sectors and apply it to building these creative assets? So Sven, go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Sven Riethmueller. I'm a professor at Yale Law School, and I run the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Clinic there. So what we do is basically teach the Yale Law students about how to help companies being built, how to advise founders, entrepreneurs, how to take their idea all the way through typically early stage financings, and then they go on without us because at that point they can typically afford lawyers. I'm not a traditional academic. I've only been doing that for 4.5 years now. I'm originally a practicing attorney. I was an equity partner at 2 different very large law firms, and I've advised many different companies, including in particular in the life sciences over the years. I've advised mRNA companies before anybody's heard of mRNA in 2004. So anybody who's gotten a injection vaccine to protect themselves from COVID, that was typically an mRNA vaccine. People talked about how, oh my God, this is such new technology. I worked on a company that already was working on that in 2004. So I'm not from the arts. I'm not from this area at all. But we advise a large a variety of clients, companies that want to build new ventures. And one of them that came to us was MOC. And the idea was, can we find a different model for arts and art-driven ventures? And so that's what we worked on for the last 2 years or so to build that up. And what we used is the analogy to what you see in the tech and life sciences space. So I'm going to talk for just a few minutes, and I'm going to dumb this down a little bit. So I apologize for those who are from the industry and are much more in the weeds, but for everybody here to understand how it works just briefly in the tech industry. And there are 2 different levels. There is what we call the portfolio company, which is the company that brings one or more products to market. And then there are the investors, and those are typically structured as funds. So let's first talk about the portfolio company, which is very similar to, in a sense, a production company that's trying to produce a movie, a Broadway musical, something, some new creation and trying to commercialize it. So the first thing is that the founders in the tech world typically get together and they form a company, a venture. And that venture is usually structured as a corporation, sometimes a limited liability company, in which the founders have an ownership interest. There are different philosophies as to who gets what is the allocation among the founders. If you have more than one, typically you have more than one. Investors usually want that you have a team. How they split that, there are two different schools. One is fairly equally. The other one is a much more nuanced, different structure. Some get much more than others. But notably, all the founders have an equity stake, an ownership stake in the company from the very beginning. Now, if people quit because they've decided to go on Wall Street or work for a large corporation, whatever, they lose a portion or all of that ownership interest because the ownership interest is subject to something called vesting. So you earn it over time as you contribute. There are also various other aspects. If you have already developed some IP, maybe you do not get that subject to vesting. But overall, there is a concept here that you have to put in the work to execute on the vision. All the IP that the creators have created, the founders have created, goes into the company. Nobody's holding anything back if the lawyers have done their job. So this is a statistic here that shows, again, how many companies have split their equity, and you can see it's basically almost 50-50 how founders approach this. But again, the point here is all the founders have an equal, in terms of their rights, equity stake. I don't mean in terms of number, ownership percentage, but everybody owns the same, typically the same type of ownership interest, common stock typically. Why is that important? On the one hand, it's because of the corporate structure. The stockholders decide who's on the board of directors. Board of directors appoints the officers. It also means, it's very important, as to the economic rights, your share of the eventual proceeds when this venture is successful. In the tech world, it typically becomes successful when there's an exit. An exit is either the company gets sold or it goes public. And under those circumstances, the ownership percentages that the founders have can become liquid. Okay? And if there's a merger, if there's a sale of the company, they automatically become liquid because the company gets sold or the shares get sold. If the company goes public, the founders can decide whether they want to sell in the public market. But in that process, to get to the exit, the company has to take on investors. The founders, as a result, get diluted. So the typical structure that you have is you have three different types of owners in a typical portfolio company. You have non-founder managers and employees, founders and investors. Founders were the original creators. They have a good stake in the company. The investors are the ones who come in. They now fund the company, and they take a stake. But notably, and this is very important, in a startup, an early-stage company, the employees all take an ownership stake. They all get equity, typically. The structure is options, restricted stock units, whatever, but they typically become owners in the company. So if you look at this, so you typically have 10 million shares that you start with, and those get then allocated to the founders, and then over time, these other groups come in. So if you look at it here, there's an example here. The founders have 8 million shares. Early employees come in, they receive 1 million. It sounds great, 1 million, whatever. I mean, they're worth very little, right? But there's a method to the madness because more people are coming in, and so you need a large enough pool. You can't do this with 1,000 shares. So then investors come in. In the beginning, there are no investors. So now you have 9 million outstanding. Founders have 8 million. Early employees have 1 million. as you get more and more investors in, the employees, and especially the founders, they do decrease. So this is a famous quote from Fred Wilson. He's a very successful VC. And he says, basically, by the time it's done, by the time that you have gone through the different financings, the founders will end up with 10 to 20% of the business. Okay, that doesn't sound like a lot, but if it's $1 billion business, by the time it gets sold, that's $100 million. That's good money, right? So the equity splits 20% for the founders, 20 to 25 for management, 55 to 60 for the investors. So somewhat similar to the prior presentation with a 50% split, 50% split. And in this case, the investors may get more. So here's a simple example how you can see basically the hires come in, early employees come in, and VCs come in. So by your second financing round, the founders have still 42%. The early employees have 3.4%, and there's a pool for future employees, another 10%. So, but my point here with this is, oh, that slide, I don't know what happened there. Okay. All right. So, so much for that. Let me just see if I cannot go back to. Can I go back one way? Oops. There we go. Oops. All right. So my point here is, though, that by the time the company exits, you will have equity ownership by the founders still, by employees, and of course by the investors. The investors have certain preferential rights, but they're not nearly as generous as the presentation that we just saw in the film world. They have some liquidation preferences, can go into the details of all this, but if the company is successful, ultimately, typically, everybody takes pro rata, okay? Meaning everybody is the same. So if you have a company that turns, or a venture that turns into $1 billion venture, everybody participates. One of my early companies, when I was still in private practice, one of the first companies I worked on, they went public. Everybody had a Porsche. Back then it was Porsches or BMWs at the, in the parking garage after the company went public. It was a huge success. All the employees participated. It was striking to me how it's so different in the theatrical world or in the film world, where the talent, everybody, because of unions, maybe because of other arrangements, everybody is slotted into a certain category, and they're fighting for their slice of the ultimate success. Here it is much more a understanding that we're all in it together and everybody gets a certain share. I'm not saying that the system is perfect. There are lots of fights over the equity splits. Sometimes founders don't get along anymore. Employees sometimes leave early. Employees feel that they are undervalued. They also get a salary in addition to their equity compensation. But the idea is that everybody pools together. The IP is owned by the company, and everybody is kind of working towards that goal. And so one of the things that we've trying to create with MOC, one of the mods that we're trying to do is give the creators an equity stake in the company so that they're all in it together. And not so much I'm an inventor, therefore I get, or I'm the composer, I get this royalty stream, or I'm the actor, so maybe I get some points or something. Those all make this a very, the production, the different players can play one against the other, so to speak. And so our goal is more inclusive, lets everybody be together in the company and work collaboratively to get to the point of making this a success.
Well, and I want to jump in because if you think about what's going on in our industry right now collectively, I mean, writers are striking because they sell their IP outright. So there is no ownership participation in their creation. There's so little ownership participation when a show goes to Broadway by the writers.
Yeah, it's not just Broadway. The Writers Guild is striking because before the Writers Guild went on strike a couple of years ago, the WGA forced producers to stop, or distributors, producers to stop packaging with agents, so the agent would take a certain percent off the top. That was it. They took a percentage of the entire budget. And what it did was the writers didn't make what they could have made because they only made minimum, which is still a good living, but it's not, and plus now today, because, don't get me started, but the internet, we can't monetize, we don't know how many eyeballs are on it, blah, 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 we can't pay you these residuals because
Lots of digital ad companies figured out how to monetize.
I'm having this conversation with Netflix, when Orange is the New Black started. They said, well, Penny, we don't know how many people are watching this. I said, did you ever get up and get popcorn in the middle of your show or go up to go to the bathroom? Yes. And when you came back, did it say, do you want to continue watching? Yes. So they know you're watching.
Yeah.
They know what you're watching. But people are not getting paid their residuals because it's a whole new world. That will also even out. But anyway, the writers are striking because they're not getting residuals. They're not getting, the Writers Guild. And SAG-AFTRA is probably going to follow suit, and Directors Guild is also going to follow. It's going to be one friggin' big implosion with lots of creatives out of work, and we're counting on you to find new ways for people to work.
And I guess to the moment, the idea of adapting this leaner startup model is that you control the IP with the creatives. Everything can be split up equitably. It's very flexible. We all have different goals in developing our work, but if you do it in this model, what we have seen is this is the foundation of the innovation space.
Right, and so from the MOC side, now switching to MOC, so MOC is the investor. So the idea behind MOC is to be like the Y Combinator for the arts. I don't know if anybody heard of Y Combinator. It's basically an accelerator or incubator. They take an equity stake in the company, but they provide a lot of resources and making a lot of introduction to investors, and they give some funding. And so MOC basically has adopted a similar model with even more equitable aspects for the creators, but the idea basically being that MOC is a fund and that invests in multiple projects, not just one investment, one project, but very similar to the VC world. As you said earlier, this is high risk. I've only found one paper that talked about how risky the film industry is. But if I compare that to the statistics in the life sciences or in the biotech or in the tech industry, they're very similar. The risk profiles are very similar. So I don't understand why there are no more funds that are taking the approach of let's invest in multiple creative endeavors. One of them is bound to take off. And so that's what MOC is doing, is basically now providing funding, early seed funding for these creative endeavors and treating them like portfolio companies. With one more aspect to that, in a typical venture fund, the venture fund is structured such that you have the limited investors who are institutional investors, Yale being a very prominent investor in these funds, and then you have venture fund, that basically the venture firm that basically manages the fund, that decides which companies to invest in and so on. And there's a split. They get management fees, these venture firms, and they get a profit split, typically 20-80. MOC does this a little bit differently in that it will allow the creatives, the founders, so to speak, to receive a portion of the carry, of that profit participation of the entire fund. So as a founder or as a creator who is part of one portfolio company, you will also participate in the success of the fund as a whole. So that encourages collaboration among the different creators. So we're trying to make a lot of changes here in this industry. The idea basically being that by pooling the resources, having a large number of creative assets, we are creating more market power to then talk to producers, to distributors and so on, to basically change some of the very inequitable terms.
Yeah.
And a lot of questions and...
Let's just take one. I saw your hand up. Yeah.
Hi, Chelsea Merrick here. I'm with the Single Family Office and Private Arts Foundation Group of Capital. We have been recently looking at theater as a potential art vehicle, and we're actually recently shown as an investment. For example, Jessica Chastain's show on Broadway right now, A Doll's House. We had to pass on it because we just simply didn't have the expertise in knowing, what the metrics are to determine, success in the theater world. So can you kind of share from all of your perspectives how to determine, what the metrics are to evaluate a show or a production and how to look at it from an investment standpoint?
It's really interesting, right? Because in a traditional structure, you're looking at the success of the Broadway show itself.
Right.
Not necessarily, unless you work something out with the producers, not necessarily of the success of the asset as it goes forward. And so in the old model, it's very tricky, right? Like you do get this sort of like high risk profile narrative around these assets. But if you were investing like through the MOC model with the fund structure, you're actually investing in the vehicle that holds the IP itself. And so you would have as an investor exposure to every bit of derivative product that goes on.
Right, think merchandise, then the film comes out, one thing people don't realize, for those who have kids in the arts and high school, they have to license the plays. There's a lot of money in that as well. All of that, the idea is basically you have to look at the asset as a whole. The asset goes in our model, the asset goes into the portfolio company, just like in the tech industry, and the whole asset gets commercialized through these different streams. So your exit is basically, when it goes on Broadway or when the movie is made, but that's only the beginning. And these have fairly lengthy, revenue generation streams. You're absolutely right. They're not measured that well. It's a very secretive industry because they don't go public, right? So there is a lot of data about how much money did Hamilton make altogether, right?
Is there
I don't know.
Is there a defined scope of what creative assets fit within the accelerator or portfolio? And then, how do you direct? Do you have a thesis that guides it? I'm just curious, where you draw the line.
That's you.
Yeah, definitely. So right now we are looking at we do have a thesis. It's very it's very much like looking at creative assets and their full potential. We are staying within verticals that we feel very comfortable with right now. So particularly invested in musicals like Shimmer, particularly invested in film and TV. But the hope is, and we very intentionally left our cornerstone pretty flexible because we know that creative assets can take the forms of video games, of literature, and that all of these different franchises can be built out. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, Samantha Williams. I'm an artist producer. I love this idea about giving the creatives the ability to be sharing equity. I'm curious about, in your own experiences, how you've gone about differentiating percentages of equity across the many different roles of creators in, for say, a musical. I can imagine a director getting a little cranky if they're getting the same percentage as an assistant lighting director.
Of course.
And so I'm curious if you kind of set a percentage amount for assistant roles versus designer roles versus top, how do you go about differentiating those parts?
For us as MOC, we work really carefully with the creative team. Generally, it starts with 1 to 3 authors, and so we know that we're building out an equity schedule and structure that is aligned with their vision. But what we've been and it's all a laboratory, right? Like, you know, you're building out creative assets that are going to look radically different from each other, even if they sit in the same vertical. But one thing that's been really exciting is to consider, like, what is the appropriate way to bring on, like, proportionally a director versus the original author? You know, what should they get? You know, if you want to tie talent to